Three, two, one. Hello, and welcome to Jenkins Docs Office Hours. Today is March 6th, and around the table we have myself, Kevin Martins, Bruno Verachton, Chris Stern, Birgit, Meg McRoberts, and Soham right now. So more people might be joining us shortly. We just wrapped up the Google Summer of Code 2025 project overviews meetings. Some people might take a moment between. So if they show up, we'll just welcome them in as normal. And Mark may or may not join. He was doing another meeting just prior to this. So depending on how that's going and whether or not he needs some time. But we'll get there when we get there. For the time being, we'll go over the agenda. So just another reminder that the contributor spotlight's been published and some notes on further development there. Just some updates on the documentation developer experience that Meg had initially brought up a few sessions ago. Documentation fixes that were implemented, not needed anymore, thanks to Chris. Another reminder about the command palette and the blog post that we published. Some news about Google Summer of Code now that the project overview meetings have happened and further events are going to be happening soon enough. We'll discuss the Chinese documentation site and where things are at there. Not much has changed in terms of progress, but just a quick reminder for everyone. We just had an LTS release this week as well as the weekly release, so we'll touch base on that. Jenkins Contributor Summit, recent work done for Jenkins.io. Lots of good stuff there. And then depending on our time, if we get through it, we'll just talk briefly about Alpha Omega, project ideas, plugin developer docs, and Blue Ocean deprecation. Again, these are not crucial, but if we have time, we'll talk. Anything else that needs to be added to the agenda today, or anything else anyone wanted to make sure we talk about? Okay. So first things first. So again, the contributor spotlight for February was published about halfway through the month. It was featuring Kosuke Kawaguchi, the creator of Jenkins. So a lot of great insight and background there for him. And just it's nice to hear from Kosuke. We don't necessarily always hear from him anymore, so it's great to be able to share those stories and share his experience with how Jenkins came to be. And then for the March spotlight, I just interviewed Yaroslava Fenkin, who was part of the Alpha Omega CSP project that just happened at the end of 2024. So you'll get some, he'll be the next spotlight we publish this month. And then I'm going to be conducting additional interviews over the next few weeks and coming months for further spotlights throughout the year. For the documentation developer experience, Meg had raised this originally. She was having issues getting the setup working. So we did some testing and some crowdsourcing, found that others weren't having the same issues. So we tried to address some of that. I did add instructions on updating or installing Docker to the contributing guide just to make life easier for someone if they don't have Docker installed. So that's available as well. And if there are further issues, we can always take that offline and try to run through a setup or determine what might be going on there.
Yeah, it's probably something stupid I'm doing. I should go try it again.
And I do stupid stuff all the time, Meg, so I wouldn't much. But yeah, we can figure it out. If you want to take a look at some point, we can always do that too. So
cool.
And just take a moment here. Welcome Manash and Mark. Thanks for joining up. And then, so next up on the agenda, there is the documentation fixes. So this was something that we had noted previously that was needed. So the version doc site that had started as part of the Google Summer of Code 23 project was being found in search engines. So Chris took it upon themselves to fix it so that the site isn't being found in Google search, and added some files in that needed to be included so that it wouldn't be pulled up. And from what we can tell, it's been effective, and it hasn't been showing up in searches when looking for Jenkins docs. It's just leading to Jenkins.io. So great. Thanks very much, Chris.
Okay.
Anything else to note on that, Chris, or you okay?
I'm okay.
Okay, cool. So the next up, so there was the command palette blog post. So this is something that was introduced in Jenkins 2.492.1. So not this past LTS release, but the last one. The search function was revamped and it's now known as Command Palette. It's really nice, provides a little bit better insight as to job status and allows you to search throughout the entire Jenkins controller so that you're able to see views, jobs, like I said, settings, etc. There's a lot of good stuff there. And it is something that we're still receiving feedback on in the original ticket and elsewhere. So Jan Faracek, thanks to him for implementing that, and Tim Jacome as well as others. But it's something that the features and the functions can still be added to. We're open to feedback. So anyone with any ideas or suggestions or feedback on that, feel free to submit them, share them where you would like and where you can. And yeah, if it's something we can act on, it's something we can act on. Next up is Google Summer of Code. So again, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, we just wrapped up the second of 2 project overview meetings. So we had the first one yesterday and the second one today, going over the top 8 projects that we have for potentially including in Google Summer of Code 2025. That will be based on everything else that goes into it, contributor proposals, the work potential, what sort of interest is split between the different projects, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of great interest and a lot of good questions and activity in the meetings. It's really nice to see the participants and the potential contributors really showing up and sharing their interest in this. It's really nice. And yeah, looking forward to it. We've got a couple other additional mentors. Thanks to Vibhav and V for their involvement. And then a couple of the project ideas that would come into contact with Jenkins.io is the version doc site or retooling of Jenkins.io site. So that would be something that Chris is mentoring as well as myself. And again, it's been nice to see a lot of activity in the Gitter channel. Multiple people are interested in that. And then there's discussion about what that might look like as far as the project, whether it would continue on from the work already done back in 2023, or if it would be starting from scratch. But specifically for the Gatsby part, the Antora part that we had started with and have built up already would be brought over to this project. The Antora part's the bigger part of it in terms of framework and structure. And so might be more consistent to start over on the Gatsby part, but again, further discussions will be had about that. That's something that you discuss with Chris and myself, more so Chris in the tooling and framework part of it. But I'll be co-mentor for documentation aspects and helping make sure that the UI UX of it makes sense and that people can navigate, get the documentation and answers they need, stuff like that. So lots more to come there. And then the other one that kind of coincides with Jenkins.io is the success stories site. So the idea is that would need some retooling / rebuilding / modernization. And then there's a lot of interest in that as well. Multiple people saying that they're interested in that project, which is really heartening to see. And we'll have more information as they become available. This officially kicks off Google Summer of Code 2025 season for us. So we're really excited and looking forward to that. I've included the recording for yesterday's session here in the Google Doc. There's going to be another recording available once Alyssa makes it public and available, and I'll add that in here once it's available as well. But yeah, really excited, looking forward to it. Lots of activity, and it's really great to see so many people joining in that meeting, joining in this meeting that might not normally be here. So thanks for showing up. Chris, Bruno, any other thoughts or anything you want to add about Google Summer of Code?
I think we had a question in the chat about it.
Yeah. Oh, cool. I didn't even see that. Sorry. Thank you. Yeah, Biri, what's your question?
Hello, sir. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you, Biri. Go ahead.
Yesterday in the meeting, I guess for the complete retooling of the Jenkins.io, you mentioned here there was a starting from scratch or to begin the work that was done in 2023 by the contributor. So in Feb, I guess I was researching more on the part that was done to the docs.jenkins.io repo.
Mhm.
So what's the percentage of the we can say for the proposal. So what can be the most perfect way to initiate it, like actually starting from scratch, or like we can do from what the work was left over. As I can see in the project idea, there was an point to like we expect the applicant to include the result of the audit in their of proposal. So
Well,
had
I think we just discussed this. So if you go to the second point on like the mentors weekly part, that's what you answered. And also like for this type of question, do not ask it during the docs office hours because it's not related to this, but ask in the Git channel for JSON, please.
thanks. Okay.
Thanks, Virgi. Appreciate the question. So yeah, just like Chris said, as we stated here, we're going to be reusing the Antoro part. Gatsby might be reworked entirely, but the Gitter channel is the best place to have those discussions. So if you have further questions or want to know more about it, that's the best and correct place to discuss further. That way we can have focused conversations on that topic, as opposed to kind of fitting it into Doc's office hours, for instance. So yeah, thank you very much though. Next topic on the agenda is the Chinese documentation site and Chinese localization plugin. So originally last year we were discussing the potential of retiring it, but after finding out there's 58,000 installations of the Chinese localization plugin, it's not as minimally used as we thought originally. So Mark and Rungsha were able to discuss this at FOSDEM and come up with some ideas about what to look for, whether we can find out the actual usage stats via analytics and localization. And instead of just retiring it because there's so much usage, maybe an alternative way to have that translation be available, because it has not been updated necessarily the same way the regular Jenkins.io site is updated. So as far as the content goes, it's not as up to date as it could be, and the translations leave a little bit to be desired. So this alternative method would kind of bring it to up to the current and be more in line. Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, I think Chris is probably the best voice here. Chris is a native Chinese speaker, right? And so
Yep.
Chris's sense, I think, was that it's best that we not stop this thing, but that we rather see if we can continue some way and take care of these Chinese users who might be benefiting by the localized version.
Yeah. I've created Shifu and Jira too. Oh, not that
Thanks.
one, sorry.
Thanks.
Oh yeah, that's one. How come it's like okay, yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris. Any other notes or anything you want to share on that one, Chris?
Yeah, it's like if you go back to that's actually an ongoing help desk issue with it too. So if you click on that link there, so it direct you to because discussion started by Mark on this. But I'll add to this Jira ticket, like the one we just showed before this. I'll add more details to it later.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. And yeah, so the plans have changed. Obviously, we're not going to be retiring that anytime soon, and we'll see what happens with this new process and this new potential way of working. Next is the LTS releases. So this just yesterday we had our LTS and weekly release. The reason our weekly release was pushed to Wednesday is due to a security advisory being published. So the security advisory is here and available on the Jenkins.io site. It's specific to Jenkins core and resolves a lot of security vulnerabilities. The Jenkins security team, when there is a security advisory, will help with publishing the changelog and upgrade guide for the LTS and weekly, depending on what is happening that week. So thanks to the Jenkins security team for their assistance with that and publishing all of that. And just a little milestone note, it was Jenkins weekly 2.500. So nice little milestone weekly release. So it's exciting to have been here for the shortest amount of time possible, but still see so many weekly releases now that we're at 2.500. That's really exciting. So thanks to the entire Jenkins project community, organization, info team, everyone that's involved. That's great to see. The Jenkins Contributor Summit was held the day before FOSDEM at the end of January, beginning of February. So we'll have a blog post to recap and talk about that, and we'll get that published when it's available. Then I wanted to highlight some recent work that has been submitted. So first and foremost, just Jim Klimov is a regular Jenkins contributor and community member. He submitted some updates to the Jenkins on Kubernetes docs. This included the installation docs, which is really great. And it coincides with some other work that he's currently working on for Kubernetes. So really excited to have that. And Jim's a solid contributor and really helps a lot when Winston in his wheelhouse. So it's really nice to have that. So thanks to Jim for that.
Yeah. So P.S. Jim attended the Jenkins Contributor Summit 31st of January in Brussels. I got to see Jim face to face. It was a treat.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear he was there. I didn't realize he was.
By the way, I think his actual name, he goes by Jim, but his actual name is Evgeny, I believe. So that last name hints I believe he's from the Czech Republic. And it was great to have Jim there. Thanks very much. And I am so pleased to have an update to the Kubernetes documentation. It's been so weak since we created it multiple years ago as part of a Google Season of Docs project. It hasn't had any significant update. So thanks very, very much to Jim.
And that I already went through and reviewed everything. Everything looks good. I got that merged, so it should be on the site soon. And then next up, so Birajit recently submitted a bunch of pull requests to update multiple pages in the Jenkins.io docs, update some of the UI on the artwork page, which is really nice. Also submitted a tutorial on building a C++ app, so that was great. And Birajit's been working with myself, Bruno, Chris on transferring the tutorial repo to the Jenkins docs organization so that it's in the correct place. So just thanks very much for all that work, and thanks for collaborating with us and making sure that everything's where it should be. It's really great to see. And yeah, no, it's just really lovely having newer community members and new contributors kind of joining up and dipping their toes in the very deep water. So
Birajit, thanks a bunch. Some of us on this call were writing C code before you were born. We appreciate very, very much having that piece of work. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome, sir.
And then one other thing that Birajit's been working on is updating the master branch of Jenkins.io to main. This is a little bit more intensive. I've been doing extensive testing to try and figure out what might break or what might not break. Jenkins also had some comments and some checks on that stuff to say that the changelog generator and a couple of other functions of crucial Jenkins works is not going to be broken in such a manner. So thanks to Jenkins for that, and thanks to, again, Birajit for their work on that. And we'll continue to work on that. That's not something that's going to just be merged willy-nilly. So we do have to be careful on that one and make sure that it's good to go properly and not just good enough. So we'll take our time with that. And then thanks to Monash for the work on, they updated the events calendar so that it's responsive to screen sizes now, which is great. So now on mobile devices, it's going to fit properly and you'll be able to see the full calendar instead of having it get cut off. And I was able to work with them yesterday to, along with Jenkins, to make sure that it's not just mobile devices, but also smaller screens, smaller window sizes, that it's responsive to everything, not just one use case. So that was really nice. Thanks again for the collaboration, Monash, and thanks for working on that. That's really appreciated. And then finally on here, the Lakshmi. So she updated the Jenkins.io thank you note styling. So this is something that was recently implemented. But if you go to Jenkins.io site, we have a thank you note here at the bottom of the page just to recognize contributors to the Jenkins organization. This is not just Jenkins.io. You can see that this is someone who created a pull request to a plugin within the Jenkins ecosystem. So it's looking at all pull requests, all parts of the Jenkins organization, Jenkins CI organization, everything. And we're just showcasing our appreciation and thanks in more and more ways, which is really great to see. We've also got that implemented in the contributor spotlight at the bottom of that page. So, and then the plan.
That one's for
Sorry,
me.
go ahead.
That one's for me. That was the first one we did.
Yep. Yeah. Chris was the initiator of this whole process. So Chris implemented this in the first place. Lakshmi was updating the styling on the one for the Jenkins.io page. So it's a collaborative effort. But yeah, Chris really got the ball rolling on that. So thanks, Chris, for making sure that we're keeping everyone honest and keeping everything upfront for everyone, because it's nice to have pull requests and work being done, but we need to make sure that we're not just letting that go idly by, and that we're showing our appreciation for the work that people are willingly doing. This is not, these aren't people's main jobs. These are all things that people are offering to do and volunteering to do. So they deserve their due. So the Alpha Omega documentation project idea. So this is something that there hasn't been final confirmation yet. There's still a little bit of time for Alpha Omega to make their decision, but we're not necessarily counting on that to happen this time around, unfortunately. But maybe we'll be surprised. We'll see. We'll see soon enough, I'm sure. If they do end up selecting us, there will be potential there for creating more tutorials for plugin developers, not just maintainers. And what that looks like, there's the adopting a plugin tutorial has been very successful and very helpful for users adopting plugins, but that doesn't necessarily cover topics about that have to do with plugin development or long-term maintenance in the same way. So having additional topics for those tutorials would really extend the documentation and provide more resources for plugin developers and maintainers to utilize and kind of better their skill set, better their experience, better the experience of users of the plugins, and just overall create a better environment for everyone. So more to come on that. We'll see what happens there. And failing that, that's always something that we can discuss later in another topic. Those things are still, just because the Alpha Omega grant doesn't go through doesn't mean they can't be discussed or implemented later on down the line. So it would just be something that allows us to dedicate someone for that purpose, or dedicate the time for that purpose. So the plugin developer documentation. So again, similarly, the improved plugin tutorial helps, but the plugin development documentation is more extensive and a lot more in depth than the improving a plugin tutorial goes. This was a topic that Antoine Neveu actually brought at a previous Docs office hours. I'm going to be working with him a lot more closely in the coming months, so I'm hoping that we can have sort of a conversation around this and find a pathway to that. He's very interested in the topic and would like to help with that process. So I'm hoping that once I get a little bit more connected with him and we have more conversations around it, we can decide or determine what that would look like, what kind of help we want to include, what kind of experience we want users to have, and what kind of necessities we should be focusing on, if anything. There are a handful of work in progress pages in the plugin in the developer documentation. So this would go a long way in removing some of those and providing more information at the same time. So win-win for everyone. We get better documentation and more thorough documentation, and readers and users are able to rely on those pages to get the help and the information they need. And then lastly, we are at time, but just really quickly, so Blue Ocean deprecation is something that we've been discussing. It's something that's going to happen at some point, exactly when we don't know, but we're going to start to look towards that. Some work has been done to kind of remove Blue Ocean from the documentation, or just move it into places so that it's not front of mind. So like, for instance, the tutorials have been moved towards the bottom of the page and includes a note stating that Blue Ocean's not being actively maintained. Once we get closer to a date when Blue Ocean will no longer be part of the process, we'll start to really ramp up efforts to remove it and replace it. Things like the pipeline graph view and pipeline stage view were already existing, but really got developed further as a result of FOSDEM or the 2024 Jenkins Contributor Summit. So a lot of work's been done there. They're viable options, and they replace some functionality of Blue Ocean. So it's great that we have that. We'll point users to those alternatives. And for anything that doesn't have an alternative or have a replacement, we'll just accept that that's not a thing and inform users so that they're aware of that. So that's the agenda for today. Does anyone have any other topics, anything else they'd like to share, note, or ask about before we wrap up for the day? No. Okay. So then, so we'll wrap up. Once the recording's finished, it'll be available in 24 to 48 hours. Be cross-posted on the community discourse channel. And if you're not there already, please join up. Requires an account, but it's a great focal meeting point for Jenkins conversations. Docs, Google Summer of Code, Infra, everything gets discussed there. So the community discourse site is the place to be. Until then, we'll see you in a couple weeks. Take care, stay safe, and thanks again for being part of the community.
Thank you.